Hello everybody and welcome back to another one of those videos where I talk about updates in the Steam version of Dwarf Fortress coming from Toady1 and KitFox. We got 10 minutes of gameplay with music and no commentary. This is going to be a big one. Strap in. Of course, first things first, if you would like the link to the full video, that is in the description. You can also find that just at the KitFox YouTube channel. Of course, if you would like these updates directly in your inbox, you can sign up to the newsletter in the description of this video as well. I will be picking apart things that I think are interesting as the video goes on. The first thing I would like to highlight about this sequence here is there is a well being built, which is something we haven't actually seen being constructed yet in-game. We've seen finished wells, but we haven't actually seen one being constructed. We're going to see a lot of the building menu, which is brand new. We're also going to see jobs being assigned and managers being moved around and a bunch of other very interesting things. Also, shoutouts to the fact that this is mostly a cavern fort. Big fan. I know I've said this before in other videos of gameplay, but have you actually sat down and listened to this music? I'm going to shut up for a couple seconds and just let you have a hear. So one of the first screen grabs I would like to snipe and just talk about for a few seconds is right at the beginning of the video is actually a desert biome. And this is the first time that we've seen a desert biome just at all, period. So this is absolutely brand new to us. And as always, keep in mind everything in Dwarf Fortress is a work in progress. But I just want to shout out the cactuses for a second. Look at those trees. They look very similar actually to the way the underground cavern mushroom stalks look. Of course, there's, a little downward stairway in the middle of this screen leading down into the actual fortress itself. But I like the way the grass looks in comparison to the sand. It's very obvious, where things begin and end. The stone is also very clear and obvious, and I like it. Almost looks like moss growing. I think it looks quite nice. This is obviously not entirely a desert. This is just kind of a sandy, hotter biome. A total desert, of course, would just be pure sand. It makes me really curious to know what black and red sands look like. If these are just kind of, I'm assuming, your normal yellow sands. As always, we'll continue on. Now, coming up in a moment here, we're actually going to see some dwarves chop down the mushroom stalks, which is another thing that we haven't seen before. We haven't seen any dwarves hack down trees at all, but this is our entrance into the caverns, and as you can see, they're living life dangerously, preparing to fight against building destroyers, unless that happens to be an artifact door, which I don't think is the case. I want to kind of highlight things that are kind of new to me and stuff that I haven't seen before. Over here on the right, we have the little stairwell kind of in the middle of the black stone, or the dark stone that hasn't been mined out yet. We can see out into the caverns. We can see various different types of stone, and we're getting a little bit of variety, and we're seeing Tarn doing some designating. I will continue pausing periodically as I see things that I think are interesting. Let's continue. Now here you're actually seeing Tarn open up the menu for woodcutters specifically, and then assigning dwarves to go out into the caverns and begin hacking down the trees themselves. So of course they're going to go stand next to them, and then we're going to see them collapse, and then the little bits of wood appear on the ground, as per Dwarf Fortress affair, and then dwarves come flying out and carry them back into the stockpile. Also worth noting, we can see dwarves on multiple Z levels, just like that one GIF from the last update. So here we actually see a dwarf getting assigned a task at a stoneworker's workshop to make some furniture, which I think is very curious, because weren't those always called mason's shops before, or am I going kind of crazy? I thought that a stoneworker was like a stone crafter. Regardless, they're working on a little office for their manager, and that is your basic noble that allows you to do your basic tasks without having to do them manually. So you can just kind of type them in the scheduling screen, and then they just get done. So now we see them assigning the office with the zone, and they're going to place the furniture in a little bit. Now this next bit here is actually quite interesting. This is a brand new menu that we haven't seen before. So they're working on us making a carpenter workshop to make wooden beds. However, in doing so, they're actually popping up the workshop build screen, which we haven't seen before, which is this nice little bit of UI that pops up along the bottom. They then select the shop itself and place it down manually, which is actually kind of, like I said, interesting. This is all new to us. I quite like the way this UI looks. I was expecting them to go up along the left side of the screen in kind of a vertical style instead of flat, but once again, everything is still work in progress. We don't know if this is going to stay this way. That being said, I do think it's an interesting thing. Also, do note, of course, as per many other times in the past, a lack of, hotkeys. This next little bit is pretty simple. They're digging out a bunch of bedrooms for the dwarves. Not too much to talk about here, so we'll just continue. Now this little tidbit here is actually quite interesting. They're assigning the designations for an office and giving it to their manager. I quite like the way that this UI flow works. I think it is quite elegant, actually. The next screen that we're going to see fill up here is the actual work order for beds. So we're going to see them pop up the manager screen, search through until they find beds, and then put through that work order for the carpenter's workshop that was constructed a couple of minutes ago. Once again, an incredibly quick little flow. I will hope that this is the sort of thing that will be very approachable to a newer player. As somebody who's played for ages, I'm very used to just hitting UMQ and then typing in what I need, but I'm curious as to what you guys think of this flow. Now they're just checking to confirm that the work order has gone through in the carpenter's workshop. This next little bit is a little bit difficult because there isn't honestly a huge amount to talk about. It's just Dwarf Fortress gameplay. We can see them locking a door down in the basement just to make sure that nothing that can't destroy the door is just going to come running in. You know, you don't want to get those naked mole dogs in the fort. And then we have up here, they're going to clear some rocks and then also queue up some beds using the search function this time instead of clicking through the filters. Overall, I think that this gameplay is a huge step in the right direction, kind of showing that I think that maybe I don't want to jump too far ahead of myself, but from what Tarn has said to me in the past and from what we've seen, it's actually starting to look like the Fortress mode chunk of Steam and itch.io's DF release is looking pretty far along. Like, I'm actually very curious as to how much they still have left on their checklist, at least for Fortress mode. So that would still mean that we still have Adventure mode and Legends mode that probably still needs a whole lot of work. I'm actually starting to wonder if we're even going to see things like, the air quotes hidden fun stuff, you shall not pass, wink, wink, nudge, nudge stuff from the basement, and if we're actually going to see the Forgotten Beasts as well before the actual release. Because that's something that I've been very curious to see, but, I know that Tarn likes his secrecy, so perhaps we won't. And here you are, you can see him searching with the bed. Actually, I shouldn't be assuming it's Tarn. It could also be Zach. Who knows who's playing, actually? I'm seeing this footage before the newsletter goes out. Here we see a little bit more of the labor screen and just passing through, looking through the different UI elements. It's difficult to offer any commentary here because I've seen most of these screenshots of most of these UI elements separately over the last few months, right? And this has been kind of a slow period of time for me, and now it's like, oh, look, it's everything kind of in concert. We're actually getting to see what the workflow in the game itself feels and looks like. I guess, like, the thing that I can say more than anything here is, what do you think of this gameplay if you're watching this? I'm very curious, because to me, this just looks like Dwarf Fortress. It looks like Dwarf Fortress, but, you know, a little shinier. From what I can tell, watching the footage, I will say that the different dwarf jobs for me are relatively easy to discern at a glance based on the color of the dwarves' clothing. I mean, previously the entirety, including like they had like no skin or anything. So previously it was just like the visuals of them were entirely faded from one color to another depending on what their job was, and very quickly you'd figure out, like, just at a glance who was doing what. I'm sure things are gonna, and like I've said many times, things are gonna look a little bit confusing in footage if you haven't played the game, because Dwarf Fortress is one of those games, especially right now, that makes a lot of sense if you're playing it in real time, and not a lot of sense if you're the one watching it and you haven't played it. So Dwarf Fortress is tricky like that, but I do honestly think that this is going to be a very approachable version, at least compared to what we have currently in ASCII, even if it's just because of the mouse support and the shiny visuals. Also, gosh, the caverns look so nice. But that's more or less everything for this footage. If you would like to watch the video without my voice in the background, you can find a link for that in the description. If you would like to support these videos and the Dwarf Fortress news updates that I do, you can do that over on my Patreon, patreon.com/BLINDIRL, and you'll see some credits in a few seconds. If you'd like to support Dwarf Fortress right now and you're waiting for the Steam version and you're frustrated that it's not out yet, you can go and grab yourself some fancy Patreon stuff over at Bay12 Games' Patreon, and of course you can chuck some money in their general direction on PayPal, because that is how they keep the lights on over at Bay12 Games working on Dwarf Fortress. I just want to say a huge thank you to the community of Dwarf Fortress for supporting these videos and supporting Tarn and helping keep this game going. Dwarf Fortress is an anomaly, and there isn't a lot of things like it on the internet. So overall, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.